So schema theory is one of our theories of learning in the skill acquisition part of the exam, and it's one of those topics that students tend to struggle with a little bit because there's lots of new terminology, but if we learn the main concepts, then it's really rather straightforward. So schema theory is basically about creating rules. Okay, so a schema is a rule that helps us to make our decisions, and we base these rules on what we've done through our experience. So the more experience that we have, the better we are at deciding on which schema to use and developing those schema. So a good example of this in life is that like a red light in a traffic light. If we see a red light, we know that means stop. So this is a schema that we've built up that in a given situation that we produce a given reaction. In a sporting context, if the ball is travelling towards you, you'll catch it. So again, that's a schema that you'll develop. Within that, though, there will be different types of catch for different types of balls arriving in different directions, etc. So this is where the idea of a general motor program comes in. So Schmidt, who came up with the schema theory, said that we don't just have different motor programs for every different action that we do, but instead we have a general motor program. We store general motor programs in our brain, and what we do is that we're able to adapt those general motor programs according to the exact situation that we're in. So questions on the exam tend to be around the 4 conditions or sources of schema, and these are split into 2 parts. So the first one is recall schema. So recall schema comes first, and this happens before the action. So these are thought about actually before we perform. So the first thing to consider are the initial conditions. So this is the first source of schema. So the initial conditions is what's going on in the environment. So you might be asking yourself, where am I? Where are other people? What is happening? What is going on? Is that ball travelling fast towards me? Where's my opponent? Where's my defender? Where are my teammates? What is actually going on? And then based on the initial conditions, we look at response specification. So this is you making the decision. So based on what's going on, I need to decide what I'm going to do. And I come up with the specification as to how I need to respond. So it could be as simple as that the initial conditions are that there is that the cricket ball, if I'm fielding, the cricket ball has been hit towards me, towards my right hand side, up high, and my response specification is I need to stick my right hand out up above my head and catch it, fingers pointing upwards, above my head, one-handed. So that's the decision that I try to do. Alright, and I do both of these things before I actually perform the action. Then we have recognition schema. So recognition schema happens either during, depending if it's a more of a continuous, longer duration skill, or it could be if it's a discrete skill, it would happen after the action where I would review it. So I get 2 sources of recognition schema, and the first one are the sensory consequences. Now the main form of sensory consequences is the kinesthesis. So how did the movement feel? So I get a sense of that fairly quickly myself, and that's likely to come intrinsically. So this is my knowledge of performance around how well the movement actually felt and what it was like. So if I was going to catch that cricket ball, I will get a good sense of how the ball felt as it hit my hand. So it could have been, for example, that I actually caught it in the tips of my fingers, that I got my hand in a slightly wrong position, and therefore the response outcome, which is the last of the 4 sources, which is the result, might have been unsuccessful. So this is my knowledge of results here, alright, and I might have dropped that catch because I got it in the wrong position. Now the idea of schema theory is that we learn from our mistakes. So if that was something that I did wrong and I felt that catch go in the wrong part of my hand, and that the outcome was that I dropped the catch, the idea is that next time I was in those same initial conditions, so that i.e. the ball's travelling up into that same position and I'll need to catch it, I would make sure that I get my hand up a little bit higher and make sure that the bulk of my hand and my palm of my hand actually catches the ball, and that would be my response specification in those same initial conditions. So the idea is that you learn from your mistakes through schema, and this is how it works. The other kind of question that you could get on schema is how a coach would try to develop schema in their plays. The number one answer here is varied practice, and this is one of your types of practice that you need to look at in your 12-mark question. And varied practice is where we practice the same skill in varied conditions, so different environmental conditions. So if I was doing my cricket catching, I wouldn't just have someone hitting the ball at me from the same position and me stood in the same conditions. I would be taking different positions. If I was a catcher, I would take up some different positions every time, slightly different angle, slightly different distance. I might get the person hitting the ball from slightly different angles and different distances, and certainly to different positions in terms of height, in terms of velocity, in terms of direction, etc. The idea of that is that you build up more schema. So if I build up more schema, I'm better able to guess which exact response specification to choose when I meet the certain initial conditions within a game situation. So the coach can also give loads of information in terms of feedback. Alright, so give lots of feedback in terms of did it go right, did it go wrong, reviewing the recognition schema in terms of sensory consequences and outcome to develop that learning. And as much as possible it should be realistic. So that varied practice should relate to the game. Alright, so practice in situations that would happen in the game. So if I was doing the cricket catching, get a bowler in, ball in at the batter who's actually hitting proper shots at me, and I'm in realistic positions, etc. In team game sports, the varied practice that should be done is a game. So an example of varied practice would be an actual game. So practicing a game, or even if that's a small-sided game within training, we should do those types of activities that are really realistic to the game. And this ensures that we get good transfer. So we want positive transfer from what we're doing in the training to what we can do in the game. We can also make things more challenging. Alright, so I can start with a simpler version, alright, and build it up to a more difficult version. And a good coach could also use some video analysis, giving some visual guidance in terms of what I'm doing. So again, building up that schema, building up the reviewing of the recognition schema and relating it to certain different initial conditions to decide, well, if this was the initial condition, this is what I would do. This would be my choice. This would be my response specification. And lastly, making the players aware of transfer possibilities. So transfer is something that really links in with the schema because we can develop across the similar initial conditions.